Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 4 wide receiver start or sit decisions for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, we're going to be going over every single matchup from Thursday Night Football all the way until Monday Night Football, and I'll be telling you guys whether I believe you should start or sit every single notable wide receiver in these matchups. But before we get on into things, I would like to ask, if you are new to my channel and you do end up enjoying it, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below, because not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 fantasy football championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new to my channel or not, please make sure you hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I'd also like to ask that if you guys are on Twitter and would like to follow me, to please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. The link to my Twitter is also down below in the description. So without further ado, let's get into things. We begin with the Thursday Night Football matchup between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, right now, I am only comfortable starting Marvin Jones. It seems like while Urban Meyer ended up cracking the code, ended up figuring out how to use James Robinson last week, I'm just not too sure that Urban Meyer is going to be able to kind of complete the puzzle on how to use Laviska Shenault in this offense. It seems like Laviska Shenault is just a complete odd man out in this offense, and unless there was an injury to Marvin Jones or DJ Chark, that his role is going to kind of be the third wide receiver on the team, and he's just not going to get the correct usage that you wanted when you drafted him in fantasy football. So right now, I'm definitely considering, if I have him, cutting him off my team. I'm definitely not playing him this week up against the Cincinnati Bengals. For the Jaguars, like I said, Marvin Jones is really the only wide receiver that I feel comfortable with starting at this point in the season. Marvin Jones is clearly the #1 wide receiver on this team, and he's going to be peppered with targets in this game up against the Cincinnati Bengals. Even if Trevor Lawrence has been struggling, he still has been feeding the ball to Marvin Jones. So I think, despite the fact that Lawrence hasn't looked too good, and despite the fact that I think the Jaguars may struggle immensely in this game up against the Bengals, that Marvin Jones should still be able to have a solid game. And with that said, obviously, Laviska Shenault, I talked about cutting him before. He's definitely a guy you're going to want to be sitting down. And DJ Chark, between him and Laviska Shenault, I definitely like him a lot more, but he's nowhere close to Marvin Jones in my eyes, so I'm sitting down DJ Chark in this game. For the Cincinnati Bengals, my assumption right now is that T. Higgins is not going to end up playing. If things flippity-flop and T. Higgins ends up being able to be good to go on Thursday, which is very close to right now. So again, I assume he's not going to play, but if he does, I would move him into the start column and move Tyler Boyd down to the sit column. The reason why Tyler Boyd is a start this week is because without T. Higgins there, that gives Tyler Boyd a lot more volume in this offense, and the Jacksonville Jaguars defense sucks complete and utter donkey cock, so it should be relatively easy for Boyd and Jamar Chase to have big games. And especially Jamar Chase, because Jamar Chase basically fooled all of us. He played like ass in preseason, wasn't looking too hot in training camp. Like 2 days before the season ends up starting, something comes out that this guy can't even see an NFL football. He can't catch an NFL football because he can't track it through the air because it doesn't have those white lines on it like an NCAA football. He just completely fooled us all. Houdini act type of deal there, where everyone was completely like laughing at Jamar Chase, and the guy's been unreal this season. Continue to fire up Jamar Chase every single week, and especially in this very solid matchup up against the Jaguars defense. I expect Chase to have a very big game this week. So next up, we move on to the Sunday slate, beginning with the Tennessee Titans and the New York Football Jets in New York. So my assumption here, just like with T. Higgins being out, is that A.J. Brown is going to end up missing this game and potentially missing multiple weeks, as they have put him on the week-to-week tag, which normally isn't the greatest. Julio Jones did end up getting a little bit banged up in that game last week, as he did not return at the end of the game, but the Tennessee Titans were playing so well that it didn't really matter. I think Julio Jones is a must start this week, especially with A.J. Brown out, because they should be able to easily just destroy the New York Football Jets defense. The Jets defense is complete and utter dog shit, and I expect Julio Jones to really step in here and have a big game this week. A lot of people are bringing up Nick Westbrook Ikine of the Tennessee Titans. If I pronounced your name wrong, I apologize. He did actually look relatively solid last week, but I think a lot of people are really looking for that diamond in the rough, and I'm just not too sure that that ends up panning out this week for the Jets. Zach Wilson completely fucking sucks. Zach Wilson looks terrible. He's throwing picks left and right. Now, do I think that you should go ahead and just call Zach Wilson a bust because he's played 3 NFL games? No. Obviously not. I think him and the Jets are going to be able to figure things out eventually this season, and Zach Wilson is going to look a lot better. But when will that happen? Probably not this game up against the Titans, so I'm definitely not going to be starting Corey Davis or Elijah Moore until I can feel a lot more comfortable with the play by Zach Wilson. And right now, again, it's very hard to feel confident in the play by this Jets offense as well as by the Jets defense. Next up, we got the Kansas City Chiefs at the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles looked like a complete and utter fucking dumpster fire of a team up against the Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football, and it was because they just didn't want to run the ball at all. I believe Miles Sanders had 2 total rushes in that game. Maybe I'm mistaking and it was like 4 or 5. But at the same time, even if it was 4 or 5 compared to 2, that's not much of a difference. I don't understand why they weren't running the ball. They got absolutely soaked by the Dallas Cowboys offense. The defense in Dallas was playing very, very well. But now we get them up against the Kansas City Chiefs. And with Devontae Smith, with Jalen Reagor, without really seeing any consistency between any of the wide receivers there, Quez Watkins, Jalen Reagor, or Devontae Smith, I just don't feel comfortable starting them this week up against the Chiefs defense. For the Chiefs, I'm going to be firing up Tyreek Hill. He's a must-start player every single week. Doesn't matter what defense he's facing. He's a guy that can bust off 2 touchdowns, 200 plus yards on any given game and just win you your week completely by himself. So Tyreek Hill is obviously going to be a start for me here up against the Philadelphia Eagles defense. And when it comes to McCole Hardman, when it comes to Demarcus Robinson, when it comes to Byron Pringle, the chip himself, I just never really know which game is going to be their day. And a lot of the times, it's not going to be any of their day, and it's just going to be the Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce show, and now maybe CEH has figured it out. He doesn't stink anymore, and maybe he is just taking away a lot of targets so that Pringle, Hardman, as well as Demarcus Robinson just can't have a good game. And again, every single week, it's a huge gamble with those guys, so my best bet is just to start Tyreek Hill and sit every other wide receiver in this game. I'm editing this in right now because I just remembered I forgot to talk about the greatest signing in football in the last decade at least, Josh Gordon. Flash Gordon, the savior of the universe, is in Kansas City. What does that mean for this game? Probably nothing. But maybe this season, Flash Josh Gordon ends up being the wide receiver 2 in Kansas City that Hardman isn't, that Pringle isn't, that Demarcus Robinson isn't. Maybe he is that consistent piece that they add to this team. So for this week, sit down Josh Gordon, but maybe in the future, for the rest of the year, Gordon does elevate himself to be a startable asset in fantasy football. Next up, we got the Carolina Panthers at the Dallas Cowboys. It appears right now for the Carolina Panthers that Robbie Anderson just straight up fucking stinks. It doesn't matter that him and Sam Darnold have that connection from the New York Jets. It seems to have completely diminished, and it's DJ Moore season because DJ Moore is doing everything that we've wanted him to do for the past couple of years. He finally did it this year. He's scoring the touchdowns. He's getting the big yards. He's getting the big volume. And mono man Sam Darnold is slinging it. He gets the Dallas Cowboys defense this week, which normally the last couple of weeks I would have told you, hallelujah, this is going to be an excellent matchup for DJ Moore. But based upon what we saw last week with Diggs, this Cowboys defense looks legit. Now, is that because the Eagles' offense stinks, or is that because the Dallas Cowboys defense is completely reformed from last year and completely reformed to what we saw in week number 1 and 2? I'm not too sure, but I'm still definitely staying with the hot hand here with DJ Moore. For the Dallas Cowboys, Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb are must-start players every single week. Neither played quite well last week because it was the Zeke show up against the Philadelphia Eagles, but I expect Amari Cooper as well as CeeDee Lamb to have a decent showing in this game, if not both top 5 wide receiver showings on the week, because we know that this offense has the potential to do that with Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb. Next up, we have the New York Football Giants at the New Orleans Saints, and here I'm going to tell you to start Kenny Golladay, but I am not confident at all in this statement, but because I believe that Sterling Shepard is not going to play, because I believe that Darius Slayton isn't going to play, who else is Danny Dimes going to throw the ball to? Evan Ingram? Any of these other scrubs? No, he's going to have to force feed the ball to Kenny Golladay. Kind of what I thought was going to happen from the start of the season because they back up the Brinks truck. They give Kenny Golladay all the fucking money. Right now, Kenny Golladay is pulling a Brock Osweiler where that man just robbed Houston of millions of dollars a couple of years ago. Kenny Golladay is doing the same thing to New York because they're just not giving him the ball. It was a stupid ass move to go ahead and bring this guy in, sign him to this huge contract, and not throw him the ball. I don't get it at all, but if Slayton's out, If Shepard is out, like I assume they will be, then they just have to throw the ball to Kenny Golladay, so he's going to have to be a start on the week for the Saints. Marquez Callaway actually finally had a good game after everyone and their mother dropped him following 2 poor performances in week 1 and 2. Will he be able to replicate what he did last week? I'm not sure, so the safest bet is to sit him this week, but if it's between Marquez Callaway and some of the other wide receivers I told you guys to sit in this video, I would probably give Callaway that edge, and the other Saints wide receiver, Deontay Harris, is going to be a sit for me in this game up against the Giants. Next up, we got the Cleveland Browns at the Minnesota Vikings, but before we break this game down, I'd like to ask if you have ended up enjoying this far, to please make sure you hit that subscribe button as well as that like button down below. It helps me out a ton. Back into it, we got the Cleveland Browns at the Minnesota Vikings. So Odell Beckham Jr. doesn't play in week 1, doesn't play in week 2, but he gets the nod to go in week number 3, and then for some reason, he doesn't come out at halftime, and in my head, I'm like, oh no, is Odell Beckham Jr. hurt again? But then out of nowhere, despite everyone and their mother panicking, all of the tweets going out, being fired out, that Odell Beckham Jr. doesn't return, then he's out there, and he's perfectly fine. So while I don't believe that this is the perfect system for Odell Beckham Jr. to succeed because they run the ball so much, everyone knows that Nick Chubb as well as Kareem Hunt are going to be pounding the defense with running the ball because that is just Kevin Stefanski's offense, and that's okay because that leads the Browns to winning a lot of games throughout the season. But Odell Beckham Jr., without Jarvis Landry, with how piss poor the other wide receivers are on this team, I just feel as though you have to start Odell Beckham Jr. considering the Vikings defense isn't all that good. For the Vikings, though, you're starting all 3 wide receivers. You're starting Justin Jefferson. You're starting Adam Thielen, and you're going to start KJ Osborne. Now, KJ Osborne is a guy, if you guys remember that Conor McGregor press conference where it's like, who the fuck is that guy? That was my exact thought after he had a huge game in week number 1. And then guess what? In week number 2, he does the same thing and plays well. And guess what happens in week number 3? He is on a triple spree of having solid games for fantasy football. So you know what you're going to continue to do? You're not going to just fade him because, hey, he's bound to just cool off eventually. No, you continue firing him out there at maximum velocity because Kirk Cousins looks so good this year. He's liking that, and you're liking that if you drafted Kirk Cousins or if you drafted any of these wide receivers. So Jefferson, Thielen, as well as Osborne will be starts this week up against the Cleveland Browns in what could be a very high-scoring game between these two teams. Kirk Cousins has been really ramping it up this season, and I feel like this is the best Kirk Cousins has looked in his career since he was in Washington. So I expect the Vikings to put up a solid game this week, and I expect Jefferson, Thielen, as well as Osborne to be in your guys' lineups. I will be sitting down Rashard Higgins because, again, besides Odell Beckham Jr., you're not really going to want anything to do with this wide receiver core in Cleveland because they don't even have a clear number 2 wide receiver without Jarvis Landry. It would have been awesome if Mr. Josh Gordon ended up making that triumphant return to Cleveland, but instead, obviously, he goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. Next up, we got the Detroit Lions at the Chicago Bears, and this game just screams, stay away from it at the wide receiver position. Justin Fields looks like he has no fucking idea what he's doing out there, but it's not even his fault because the offensive line is folding. They're basically a turnstile in Chicago. Matt Nagy is a fucking idiot. Matt Nagy is talking about how he may start Nick Foles in this game, how Andy Dalton might play in this game. How is Andy Dalton going to return from injury to play in this game? I have no idea, but it's all up in the air. If I'm Matt Nagy and my idea is somehow to fix this team is starting Nick Foles, he should be fucking fired on the spot if that happens. Now, I love 9-inch Nicholas Foles. He's a fun quarterback, and he always brings some fire, some spirit to these teams. But at the end of the day, why the fuck would you bench Justin Fields for Nick Foles? Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. Matt Nagy's an idiot. Allen Robinson stinks because he's not getting the ball. Sit Allen Robinson. Sit Darnell Mooney. I have no idea what to expect out of Chicago this week. I wouldn't be surprised if the Lions rolled them this week. Khalif Raymond, Quintez Cephas. No idea who the clear wide receiver one is. I thought it was Cephas. It appears it's not. TJ Hawkinson, Swift, those are probably the wide receiver ones on the team because these other guys are just ultra inconsistent, but maybe that's not even their fault. It's probably just because Jared Goff doesn't look their way that much because he's typically force-feeding the ball to DeAndre Swift or TJ Hawkinson, but Nick Hawkinson didn't have a great game last week. I know, but in a majority of matchups, Hawkinson is going to be getting fed the ball at an aggressive rate, and maybe that happens in this game. I just don't feel comfortable starting any of these wide receivers. Like I said, Allen Robinson stinks at this point. I do believe that things are going to turn around for Allen Robinson, that he will have a fine season, and that he's not going to be a complete and utter bust for your fantasy team. But right now, I can't tell you to start him. I would sit him down if he was on my team, and I hope that you guys understand that you need to sit him down and that hopefully things will shake up, things will get a little bit better in the future. Next up, we got the Houston Texans at the no one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. Davis Mills versus the Buffalo Bills. Brandon Cooks, doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Could be Tyrod, could be Mills, could be me. Doesn't fucking matter. Death taxes. Brandon Cooks scoring a bunch of fantasy points every week. He's going up against the Buffalo Bills. On paper, this is a tough matchup, but something just tells me that it doesn't fucking matter. Brandon Cooks is playing well every single week, and I expect him to play big this week up against the Buffalo Bills. Stephon Diggs, obviously going to be an insta-lock into your lineup every single week. You drafted him in the first round. While he hasn't performed excellently this season, he's not a guy that you're just going to run away from. For the other Bills, Emmanuel Sanders as well as Cole Beasley are worthy starters on the week. Now, if it was based upon safety, you definitely want to go with Cole Beasley at this point because you know that Cole Beasley is just going to be force-fed with targets in this game and basically in every single game. But Emmanuel Sanders has been averaging at least 6 targets in every single matchup for the Buffalo Bills, and this week up against the Texans, just like he did last week up against the Washington football team, maybe he scores a touchdown, maybe he scores 2 touchdowns like he did last week. So I like all the wide receivers in this matchup up against a putrid Texans defense. The other Texans wide receivers, Danny Amendola, I don't even think he's going to play, so Chris Connolly's the other wide receiver I'll list, and he is going to be a sit for me this week. Next up, we have a matchup between the Indianapolis Colts and my Miami Dolphins, and boy, does this game fucking confuse me, because Carson Wentz looks like shit. This Colts offense looks terrible. The Colts defense looks terrible, but I don't feel comfortable starting Will Fuller and Devontae Parker and Jalen Waddle. Jacoby Brissett was force-feeding up against the Raiders, Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle was getting peppered. You get the football. You get the football. But it's not a Oprah where you all get the football. It's Jalen Waddle. You get the fucking football 7 million times. And you want to know who else he did that to? Mike Likiamagasicki. They were both getting fed. Will Fuller gets, oh my God, don't get me started here. Will Fuller is getting fucking harassed in the end zone. They're tugging at this guy in the end zone like he's Robert Kraft in a massage parlor, and what the hell is he supposed to do? It's clearly PI. The Dolphins lose the game. The officiating is terrible. But again, I know I might just sound like an angry Dolphins fan, but I try to keep it very unbiased when I talk about the Dolphins and when I talk about whatever team is playing up against them. I understand that the Dolphins defense looked really good up against the Raiders. I understand that the Dolphins have a really good defense against the pass. Up against the run, they stink. But up against the pass, they're very good. So Pittman and Pascal with a hobbled Carson Wentz who hasn't looked that great this season, there's no way in my opinion you should be starting them. And Jalen Waddle, like I said, is just going to be peppered with targets. So you got to start him. And I'm sitting down Devontae Parker as well as Will Fuller. Will Fuller got banged up on that play where he got choked out by the fucking defender. But, you know, who cares, right? It's just the Dolphins. It's just a loss for us, you know, fuck me, right? So, on to the next game here. Washington football team at the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons stink, but apparently the Giants stink even more because the Falcons beat them in the Meadowlands on Eli's not a Hall of Fame speech, but what is that when they, like, induct you into, like, the Giants jersey thing? They retire your jersey. During that, they couldn't even win the fucking game up against one of the worst teams in the NFL. Terry McLaurin, he's a start every week. Taylor Heineke actually looks pretty good. So we're going to continue to fire up Terry McLaurin. For the Falcons, I understand that Matt Ryan doesn't look that good, that the offensive line doesn't look that good, but there's no way you're benching Calvin Ridley. I do worry about his upside at the end of the season, though, because that potential number 1 finish that I saw potentially for Ridley just seems to be out of the picture right now because of the play of the offense as a whole. But maybe things end up going more his way. He's definitely not a guy you want to sit, though, because he is very safe, and he does have that upside. I wouldn't be surprised any given week if he dropped 25, 30 points in a game, but it just hasn't happened yet this season. I'm sitting down Adam Humphries as well as that bum Russell Gage for the Atlanta Falcons. Adam Humphries is on the Washington football team. The only real pass catchers in Washington are McLaurin, Logan Thomas, and Antonio Gibson. The only pass catchers on the Falcons are Calvin Ridley, Mike Davis, and Cordell Patterson. I guess Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts hasn't done shit for fantasy. Still going to tell you to start him this week, but he hasn't looked very good. This is just a sad scene for Calvin Ridley, but I hope that he bounces back and plays very well for the future. But I am a little bit worried about Calvin Ridley. Again, not so worried to where, holy fuck, I got to trade Calvin Ridley off my team, but more of like, oh man, this ain't looking the best for his upside to be the #1 guy in fantasy football, but I'm sure he'll still finish as a top 10, top 12 wide receiver on the season. Next up, we have a game between the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. In this game, everyone gets a start. DK Metcalf as well as Tyler Lockett. Now, Lockett ends up getting banged up in the game last week. Metcalf goes absolutely apeshit, and it appears that just like last year, maybe that's happening again, because if you guys remember last year, when Lockett's having these big games, Metcalf was kind of not doing much. Then the opposite. When Metcalf has the big game, Lockett doesn't do too much. And early on in the season, Metcalf didn't play the best when Lockett was going off every single week in week 1 and 2, but he wasn't terrible. But Lockett last week, because he got hurt, he just didn't play too well in that game, and it was Metcalf season. So is that what we see, this inconsistent offense every single week? I'm not sure. But right now, based upon how I feel this game is going to go, a back-and-forth affair between two great teams in the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers, I just have to fire out DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And shout out to Kyle Shanahan for freeing the man. Brandon Ayuk is now officially out of the doghouse, it appears. It appears that he is now going to be targeted, which is very nice if you drafted Brandon Ayuk, because it was starting to get worrisome through the first 2 weeks how he just wasn't getting targeted. He was targeted more last week. I expect that to ramp up this week up against Seattle. But with that said, I'm still firing up Debo, because to me right now, Debo is still the #1 wide receiver on the San Francisco 49ers offense. And despite Jimmy Garoppolo not looking that good, he's still not terrible. So both of these wide receivers do have immense upside in this matchup. Next up, we have the Arizona Cardinals at the LA Rams. Here, we're starting up DeAndre Hopkins. Now, DeAndre Hopkins was active last week, but he wasn't really helpful for your fantasy team, which I didn't see coming at all. I thought when he was good to go, when he was game time decision, when they said, hey, you know what, you're going in the game, that he was going to be fine. I was wrong. Doesn't play all that well. But this week, I expect him to be 100% and good to go. So I'm going to tell you guys to start him this week, even up against the Rams defense. I think that DeAndre Hopkins will be able to get it done. Same thing goes with Christian Kirk. Now, Christian Kirk is as risky as it gets, because this guy will have these big games, then he'll disappear. But through the first 3 weeks, he hasn't necessarily had that ultra down bad game where he scores like 2 points, which we have seen in the past with Christian Kirk, where he has these huge games and then he just has a stretch of basically just fucking taking a nap in your fantasy lineup, and then he has a big game again. Through the first 3 games, he's been relatively consistent. Up against the Rams, I think this is going to be a high-scoring affair between 2 excellent offenses. You have to start Christian Kirk in my eyes, but it is very risky. For the Rams, you're firing up Cooper Kupp. Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp are a combo like peanut butter and jelly. Like socks and your foot. Okay? I don't even know of any other. It's like Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. Alright? These are the type of combos that this is. Matthew Stafford is unreal. Which I told you guys all offseason that Matthew Stafford was really good. But I don't think too many people listened, because people seem shocked. Wow, Matthew Stafford's so good, like on Twitter. Not you guys necessarily, but I'm talking about on Twitter. People are like shocked that Matthew Stafford is good. We've known that since he was in Detroit. But Cooper Kupp is just getting fed, and I make this joke every single video, but the fact that these motherfuckers have a breakfast meeting before practice every day, that they're practicing together as they eat their pancakes, they're watching film, I assume, they're getting syrup all over the iPad, but it doesn't fucking matter. They're jolly good fellows together, Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford, and they have completely fucked Robert Woods directly in the asshole, and Robert Woods is going to be a sit for me. I have given up. Now, I'm not giving up completely, where I'm running away from Robert Woods like fucking Forrest Gump or something, where I'm completely nervous about Robert Woods, but I'm starting to get a little bit worried. You just have to be. You just have to be. But there's just no way that Cooper Kupp continues having this high of a target share in the offense. Matthew Stafford, please invite Robert Woods to the fucking breakfast. Please, or Cooper Kupp, get him there. Someone get him there. Someone let him have some fucking Fruity Pebbles with the team so he can get involved. Sorry about this rant, but it's fucking annoying. It really is, but if you have Cooper Kupp, you're probably really happy. Robert Woods, a sit. Rondell Moore didn't have a hot game. He was on the hot streak. I was advising everyone to start him. He kind of fucked me right in the ass, but it's okay. I think he will be fine for the rest of the season, but for this game, with Christian Kirk looking fire, I'm sitting down Rondell Moore. Next up, we have an illustrious matchup between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Green Bay Packers in Green Bay, in Lambeau Field. The Steelers' offense looks like dick cheese. And that's probably the best representation, like the best way to paint a picture like I'm Bob Ross of this offense. Najee Harris got 19 targets last week. 19 targets. Deontay Johnson hurt. Juju Smith-Schuster hurt. I don't think either of them are going to play in this game. Big Ben looks terrible. Big Ben looks like he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He doesn't even look like he gives a fuck. He threw an interception. I swear there was 3 defenders around. There was no wide receiver to be found. But with that said, you're still going to start Chase Claypool because he's the only wide receiver there. So you're going to play him. Devontae Adams, he's a must-play every single week. This dude got hit with a knockout punch from Mike Tyson, basically, and it looked like his eyes were glossy. He looked fucked up. Somehow, he just rises. Like Aaron Rodgers talked about this on the Pat McAfee show. He was like the Undertaker. Have you ever seen that gif where he's like back, he's like down, and he goes, wow, and he like sits back up and he's staring? That's exactly what Devontae Adams did to the 49ers. He just out of nowhere comes out of the blue tent and he's good. I don't understand that, but you know, you're going to play him this week up against the Steelers. Like I said, if Johnson and Smith don't play, or Juju Smith-Schuster, I should say, you got to sit them. James Washington, if you're in a super deep league, maybe you want to consider him. But the more I've thought about it, the more I'm like, man, I don't really want to have anyone on this team right now, except for Deontay Johnson, who's just going to get force-fed once he's in the lineup. MVS looked good last week, but I don't think he's a very reliable start because it's kind of similar to the Kansas City scenario, where there's just so many other wide receivers there, but you never really know which one's going to have the big game. And a lot of times, it'll just be Adams and Tunyon and Aaron Jones who have the good game. So next up, we have the Baltimore Ravens at the Denver Broncos. It's time to see how legit. It's a temperature check here, a heat check on the Broncos. How good is Teddy Two Gloves? Can he beat the Ravens? Well, guess what? We're going to find out on Sunday. Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown. I finally give my stamp of approval for Hollywood Brown. Week 1, week 2, he plays amazing. I'm like, you know what? Hollywood Brown, this is a real guy. This is a guy that isn't inconsistent. He's a guy that scores touchdowns. He's a guy that can catch the football. And on Sunday, up against the Lions, this motherfucker could not catch a pass. If there was a million people around him with COVID, I'm sure he wouldn't have even caught that. He looked terrible. He looked deflated. He looked so bad, but I expect him to bounce back this week up against the Broncos. Rashad Bateman may be back this week, and if he is, then that does worry me a little bit about Hollywood Brown. For the Broncos, I'm starting Sutton. Jerry Jeudy's hurt. KJ Hamler's hurt. They got to throw it to Courtland Sutton. Besides Courtland Sutton, we got Tim Patrick, who got heavily, at least elevated in my mind, in their value, or in Tim Patrick's value, from the injury to KJ Hamler. Obviously, that sucks for Hamler. Helped out Tim Patrick a lot, so I expect Tim Patrick as well as Sutton to be useful assets in this game. Sammy Watkins, he's a sit for me. I just can't trust Sammy Watkins any given week. Wouldn't be surprised, though, if he scored like 4 fucking touchdowns somehow up against the Broncos. Next up, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the New England Patriots. And in this game, I expect a murder to happen on the football field. I think Tampa Bay Tom Brady is going to go O.J. Simpson on that ass of the New England Patriots. I expect this to be a murder of the Patriots defense. Tom Brady is going to uncork a humongous game. I don't know how else to paint the picture of this game besides the Patriots getting butt-fucked by Tom Brady. Tom Brady is going to kiss them on the mouth like he kisses his son. I believe he's going to have a huge game. Now, something in the back of my head, because this is just like with the Giants last week. Everyone's on the Giants. Everyone's on Daniel Jones. Everyone's on Sterling Shepard, and everything went wrong. Everyone is on the Bucs. So something's telling me Bill Belichick's going to fucking just create some type of algorithm like he's in Good Will Hunting and figure out how to Pak the Cot Harvard Yard or whatever that is called in Boston. That was a great reference, actually. We were talking about the Patriots, and I brought up Good Will Hunting that takes place in New England. How do you like them apples? Now, again, that was just a super deep joke right there. Just had to be there to understand it, had to watch the movie. But with that said, something tells me that Bill Belichick, the mad scientist himself, will somehow be able to stop them. But everything in my mind just pushes that thought away. It says, no, that's not going to happen. This is going to be Tom Brady season, and I believe it. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. If AB's playing, he's good to go. This is a revenge game for Antonio Brown. You got to play him. Godwin, Evans, throw them in your lineup as well. One of them's probably going to disappoint. Which one will it be? I have no idea. Just play them all. And I'm sitting down Nelson Aguilar as well as Jacoby Myers because I'm sure that the Patriots might not even score 14 points in this game. Mac Jones and the Patriots offense didn't look good last week. I don't expect them to look very good up against a tough Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. And final game here, the Monday night special. We got a matchup between turn your volume down a little bit, the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the LA Chargers. Ruggs is my start for the Raiders, but he's not safe at all. The safest option is Renfro, but I will list Ruggs as the starter over him. For the Chargers, Mike Williams is on fire. He's on fire. He rides my bench every single week in my Superflex League because I can never figure out who to start. Do I want to start McLaurin, Lamb, and Calvin Ridley? That's who I start every single week. How am I ever supposed to bench any of those guys for Mike Williams? How? Gonna have to do it, but how do I do it? I don't know. That's up to me. But up against the Raiders, I think they're going to continue to keep up this heat. They're coming off of a big win up against the Chiefs, and I expect the Raiders to play well. I expect the Chargers to play well in what should be a very fun and interesting Monday Night Football game. I'm sitting down the other Raiders wide receivers, though, in Hunter Renfrow and Bryan Edwards. Thank you guys all so much for watching this video. If you did end up enjoying, please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below because not only is it free, I put out this content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. And while you're down there, make sure you hit that like button as well. I would appreciate it a ton. I hope you did end up enjoying this video. I hope you made it through all the rants that I do in these videos. I just like to have a fun time, like to give you guys some information while also having a fun time because at the end of the day, the most important thing about fantasy football, at least in my opinion, is having fun. That's why I make these videos. They're very fun for me. I hope you did enjoy. So I love you guys all so much. Thank you for all the support recently. By next month, in October, we may hit 3 million views on the channel. 3 million. Thank you guys so much for the support. Genuinely. I love you guys so much. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. I'll be back later with another video, but thank you guys so much for all the support you've shown recently. It means the world to me. I love you guys more than you will ever know. Thank you for everything. I hope you guys stay safe. Have a great rest of your guys' day, and I'll see you guys later, as always. Good boy.